My name is Olivia, and at 26 years old, I just got married to Asher, who is 7 years older than me. But let's take a step back and revisit how Asher and I first crossed paths. It all began at one of those elegant garden parties our families were fond of organizing. I was 19, having just graduated from high school, and Asher was 22, already making waves at his father's company. I can still vividly recall Asher approaching me, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Olivia, right?" he asked, his voice effortlessly charming. "I've heard quite a bit about you." I blushed, caught off guard, and managed to reply, "And you're Asher?" "I've heard about you too." His laughter, warm and infectious, made my heart skip a beat. The evening unfolded with us chatting, laughing, and, unexpectedly, discovering a deep connection. That night, our parents saw the potential for more between us, and the seeds for our future together were sown. Several years passed before their vision came to life, but not without us agreeing to a straightforward prenuptial agreement. If one of us strayed, the other could end the marriage and walk away with $5 million. Confident in our loyalty, I signed without hesitation. On the day we signed the agreement, my father, a man of deep emotions but few words, looked at me with concern. "Are you sure you're okay with this, Olivia?" he inquired. Despite his worries, I reassured him with a hug, saying, "It's fine, Dad. I trust Asher and he trusts me. It's merely a precaution." Asher, who had insisted on the prenup, echoed my feelings. "If you're uncomfortable, we can talk more about it." But I reassured him with a smile. "I'm fine with it, Asher. I trust you." His smile in return was warm and genuine. Thus began our shared life journey. We celebrated our union with a lavish wedding that became the talk of the town. I was thrilled about starting this new chapter, blissfully unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. After the wedding, we settled into a gorgeous home on the city's outskirts, living out what seemed like a dream. Asher was kind, attentive, and for a time, everything was perfect. Our honeymoon was a picturesque escape to a sunny beach resort where we basked in the bliss of our new life together. However, once we returned from our honeymoon, I noticed a stark change in Asher. He became distant, often lost in his thoughts. He would return from work late and head straight to bed without a word. And gradually, we began sleeping in separate rooms, eating at different times, and barely exchanging words. One day, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. "Asher," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on? You've been so distant since we returned from our honeymoon." He looked at me, his eyes lacking their former warmth. "I've just been swamped with work, Olivia," he replied, avoiding my gaze. I pressed further, but we barely talk anymore. "It feels like we're strangers in our own home." He sighed, running his fingers through his hair. "I know, Olivia. I'm sorry. I'll try to make more time for us." However, nothing improved. In fact, things deteriorated. Asher started coming home even later, sometimes not until the early hours. He stopped having meals with me, and our interactions dwindled. I couldn't help but suspect that he might be seeing someone else, a thought that twisted my stomach. But I couldn't ignore the signs. One night, when Asher arrived home late again, I confronted him. "Asher, are you seeing someone else?" His reaction was one of shock. "What? No, Olivia, I would never do that to you." But his absences continued, and I tearfully countered, "You're always out, and we never spend time together." He was firm in his response. "It's just work, Olivia. I'm not cheating on you." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Asher was no longer the man I had married. He was distant, cold, and seemingly hiding something. Overwhelmed by uncertainty and still deeply in love, I decided to investigate further. If Asher wouldn't open up, then I needed to find answers myself. Feeling guilty yet desperate, I checked his phone one day while he was showering. I found no suspicious messages or calls, but my heart sank when I saw he had been searching for apartments. Confronting him once more, I asked, "Asher, why are you looking at apartments? Are you planning to leave me?" He appeared startled. "No, Olivia, I was just looking." I wasn't planning to leave. But why were you looking? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know, Olivia, he whispered back. I need some space. Feeling utterly confused and needing support, I decided to confide in my mom, who has always been my pillar of strength. My mom has always been my anchor, the person I turn to in difficult times. Mom, I confided, feeling lost. Asher has changed. He's not the person I married. As she listened, concern etched across her face. She tried to offer reassurance. Olivia, she said gently, you're both still adapting to married life. These things take time. I wanted to believe her, to think that this was just a rough patch and that everything would improve. But deep down, I sensed that Asher was concealing something significant from me. Despite trying to dismiss these thoughts, the unsettling feeling persisted, like a constant whisper in the back of my mind telling me that something wasn't right. A few weeks later, I decided it was time for a change. I confronted Asher, my resolve firm. I need a job, I declared, meeting his gaze squarely. He seemed taken aback. You want to work? He asked, eyebrows raised. I nodded firmly. Yes, I need to do something productive. I can't just stay home all day. He pondered for a moment before making an offer. I could use someone at my foundation. We help children facing difficult circumstances. Would that interest you? I was surprised but intrigued. Asher's foundation was renowned for its impactful work with children, a cause I had always admired. Without hesitating, I accepted. Yes, I'd love to, I replied eagerly. Working at the foundation proved to be a revitalizing experience. I was busy and engaged in meaningful work. I met children who were incredibly resilient, having endured hardships no child should face. It was both heartbreaking and inspiring. This job not only kept me occupied, but also provided a distraction from the troubles at home. Though emotionally taxing, it felt rewarding to make a difference. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. Yet, even amidst this new fulfillment, I couldn't ignore the lingering doubts about Asher's behavior. He remained distant and enigmatic, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Driven by a mix of betrayal and the need for clarity, I decided to take a drastic step. I hired a private detective. The urgency to know whether Asher was being unfaithful wasn't just about my self-worth. It was crucial for my peace of mind. Living under the constant shadow of doubt was unbearable. Moreover, there was the prenuptial agreement to consider. If Asher was indeed unfaithful, it wasn't merely a personal betrayal. It would be an expensive mistake for him. I found a reputable detective agency in the city, run by Joseph, an ex-cop known for his sharp eye and no-nonsense approach. I shared my story and my suspicions with him. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. I'll do my best, Olivia, he assured me after I finished. But I can't promise anything. If your husband is cheating, he's doing a good job of hiding it. I nodded, my feelings mixed as I expressed my need for clarity to Joseph. I just have to know one way or another. I still remember the day Joseph came to deliver his findings, his expression somber, his eyes filled with empathy. I'm sorry, Olivia, he said solemnly. I couldn't find any evidence that your husband is cheating on you. Relief washed over me, yet there was an undertone of disappointment. I was relieved that Asher wasn't involved with someone else, but frustrated because it deepened the mystery of his changed behavior. If he wasn't cheating, then what was he hiding? Are you certain, Joseph? I whispered, barely able to conceal my dismay. Nothing at all? He shook his head. I'm sorry, Olivia. I know this isn't the outcome you were hoping for. I thanked Joseph and settled his fee as he departed. Left in his wake was a profound sense of loss. I was back to square one, with more questions than answers. Around this time, a new figure appeared at the charity where I worked. His name was Miles, the new guy, strikingly handsome with a charm that could illuminate any room. He was witty, sharp-minded, and funny, with an infectious sense of humor and the chiseled features of a movie star. In short, he was everything I could have imagined in an ideal partner. Yet, despite the attraction I felt, there was an unsettling feeling of unease. His arrival seemed too convenient, too perfect. The thought nagged at me. With the prenup hanging over my head, any misstep involving infidelity could cost me a staggering $5 million. Could Miles be a setup by Asher to test my fidelity? Driven by this suspicion, I decided to reach out to Joseph once again, asking him to delve into Miles's background and any potential links to Asher. Joseph agreed to take on the case. He began a meticulous investigation into Miles's past, scrutinizing his connections, his activities, and his interactions. Joseph was as thorough as ever, not overlooking any detail. Meanwhile, I tried my best to maintain a distance from Miles. It was challenging. His charisma and allure were magnetic, but the stakes were too high for me to let down my guard. Then, one day, Miles asked me out for coffee. I was torn. Part of me wanted to accept, eager to get to know him better, but another part of me was apprehensive, worried about what Joseph might uncover. "I'd love to, Miles," I said, my voice a mix of caution and curiosity. I managed to keep my voice steady, though it was a challenge. "I'm really busy right now, Miles. Maybe some other time?" Miles's smile faded a touch, reflecting his disappointment, but he didn't press further. "Sure, Olivia," he replied. "Some other time." A pang of guilt struck me as he walked away. What if Miles was genuinely nice? And here I was, letting my suspicions potentially ruin what could have been a good thing. But the risk was too high. I couldn't afford to act until I had concrete answers. A few days later, Joseph returned with his findings, his demeanor serious, his eyes intense. "I'm sorry, Olivia," he began, "but your suspicions were correct. Miles is indeed working for your husband." A tumult of emotions surged through me: anger at Asher for setting a trap, relief that I hadn't fallen for it, and sadness that Miles wasn't the person I'd hoped he was. Above all, I felt vindicated. I wasn't paranoid; my suspicions had been justified. "Thank you, Joseph," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "You've done an excellent job." Watching Joseph depart, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had narrowly avoided a costly mistake, yet I had lost something too: the illusion of an ideal man and the hope of finding love anew. It was a difficult realization to accept, but I was determined not to let it defeat me. I was stronger than that and resolved to find happiness again, not with an ideal man, but with someone genuine and honest. Instead of confronting Miles immediately, I chose a different tactic. I decided to play along, to feign friendship while ensuring my actions remained entirely above reproach, giving Asher no grounds for accusations. Miles, mistaking my friendliness for interest, began to let his guard down, thinking he had charmed me. The irony was not lost on me; he was the one being played. Yet I never let Miles into the loop. I couldn't risk him reporting back to Asher, so I continued to maintain the friendly aid. One day, I decided to push things further and asked Miles to join me for lunch, framing it as a casual chat about our charity work. He agreed, a smug smile betraying his belief that he was making inroads. We chose a secluded spot in the cafe. "So, Miles," I began, trying to sound nonchalant, "how are you finding the charity work?" He shrugged, confidence evident in his gaze. "It's good. Different, but good." "And Asher?" I continued, keeping my tone steady. "What do you think of him?" Miles appeared momentarily surprised by the question. "Asher? He's okay, I guess." "Why do you ask?" I feigned casual interest, aiming to appear unconcerned. "Just curious. He seems like a bit of an enigma, doesn't he?" Miles laughed, visibly relieved. "Yeah, he can be hard to read." His response was light, but I sensed an undercurrent of tension. My plan was in motion, and every piece of information was a valuable addition to the complex puzzle of my marital life. We continued our conversations about work and life, keeping them light and neutral, ensuring I didn't give Miles any hint of my suspicions. In the following days, I maintained the charade, carefully balancing the line of friendliness without giving away my true intentions. It was a delicate dance, One I was committed to for the time being, always vigilant and never letting my guard down. One day, during one of our routine lunch meetings, Miles fixed me with a serious look, a marked change from his usual demeanor. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, his voice uneasy as he shifted in his seat. My stomach tightened, sensing what might be coming. "About," I prompted, raising an eyebrow, my nerves tingling with anticipation. "About us, about this thing we have going," he replied, his gaze hopeful yet filled with a certain discomfort. My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been dreading yet preparing for. I forced a smile, masking my inner turmoil. "And what is it that we have, Miles?" I asked, maintaining my composure. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a tentative hope. "I think we have something special." Guilt gnawed at me as he spoke. Miles was falling right into the scenario I had orchestrated, but it felt far from a victory. It was necessary, yet it didn't bring any satisfaction. Nevertheless, I had to continue the act. "Yes, Miles," I whispered, my voice soft yet hollow. "We do have something special." With those words, the trap was set and the game intensified. But the cost was becoming increasingly apparent. At home, the atmosphere with Asher was frostier than ever. We exchanged only the briefest, coldest greetings before retreating to our respective corners. He spent most nights at his apartment, citing the convenience for his work commute as the reason. One Sunday afternoon, I called Miles, infusing my voice with a feigned warmth. I invited him over, and he likely thought I was finally ready to succumb to his advances. But he was utterly mistaken. As he stepped into my home instead of a welcoming scene, he was met by my stern-faced old classmate, now a police officer who had agreed to assist me. The surprise on Miles's face was immensely satisfying. The officer promptly checked Miles's documents, which, unsurprisingly, turned out to be as fake as they could be. Now it was time for my move. I presented Miles with a choice. He could either continue to align with Asher and face the legal repercussions for his fraudulent activities, or he could switch allegiances and work for me. After a tense moment, Miles's eyes flickered between the officer and me before he nodded in agreement. Checkmate, Asher. With Miles now ostensibly on my side, the real challenge began. I had turned Asher's pawn against him, but I was under no illusion about the complexity of the game ahead. Asher was shrewd and wouldn't be easily outmaneuvered. In the days that followed, I kept a close watch on Miles, aware that despite his apparent cooperation, my trust in him could not be absolute. Miles was unpredictable, a wild card whose loyalty I couldn't entirely trust, yet in our current situation, he was a necessary asset. One day, I called him into my office for a crucial conversation. "We need to talk," I said, my tone firm, reflecting the gravity of our discussion. He entered, a flicker of unease visible in his eyes. "About what?" he asked cautiously. "About Asher," I responded decisively. "I need to know everything, his plans, his strategies, all of it." Miles hesitated for a moment. "Okay, I'll tell you everything I know." With that, I had successfully turned Asher's own ally into my insider, bolstering my counterattack. This was merely the initial phase, however, the real battle loomed ahead. Asher was not the type to surrender easily, and I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. This wasn't just a strategic game anymore, it had escalated into full-scale warfare. As days stretched into weeks, my impatience grew. I was eager to confront Asher, to prove I was not the naive pushover he perceived me to be. Joseph, who had become my trusted advisor, suggested a bold move. "Push Asher," he advised. "Make him believe you've fallen into his trap." It was risky, but I was prepared to take the chance. To execute our plan, Miles and I arranged a photo shoot, posing in ambiguous ways that, without context, could suggest an affair. Yet, we were meticulous, keeping the original photos which clearly depicted the innocence of our interactions, reminiscent of a harmless Sunday school gathering. Once the photos were processed, I handed them to Miles, sealed in an envelope. "Give these to Asher," I instructed, my voice resolute. Miles looked at me, his expression laden with concern. "Are you sure about this?" he pressed. "Once you start this, there's no turning back." "I know," I replied, my voice laced with steely determination. "And I'm ready." The following day at dinner, Asher's demeanor was unusually cheerful, convinced he had ensnared me in his ploy. Yet he mentioned nothing directly, and I maintained my composure, unbothered. I knew the storm that was brewing and felt ready to face it. Meanwhile, Joseph was diligently working behind the scenes, gathering evidence against Asher. His expertise in uncovering the hidden truths was invaluable. Finally, he called with promising news. "I've got him," he declared, his tone thick with triumph. "I've got all the proof of Asher's infidelity photos, videos, the whole lot." A surge of excitement coursed through me. "Good," I responded, a satisfied smile forming on my lips. "Let's bring him down." However, I chose not to confront Asher immediately. The timing had to be perfect, and I needed him to lower his guard completely before I made my final move. I was resolute in my strategy. I wanted Asher to believe he was on the verge of triumph, to witness the shock on his face when he realized he'd been thoroughly outplayed. So I bided my time, perfectly playing the role of the dutiful wife, patiently awaiting Asher's move. I was well prepared for what was to come, the clock ticking down to the pivotal family dinner, a showdown that I knew would be the ultimate test. The dinner was hosted at Asher's parents' mansion, an opulent residence that radiated the essence of old wealth. Asher played his part flawlessly, the perfect son and attentive husband. Yet I knew the facade would soon crumble, and everyone else would see the truth as well. We were about halfway through the meal when Asher cleared his throat and stood, a smug smile curling his lips. "I have something to say," he announced, his eyes locking onto mine. He dramatically pulled out a set of pictures of me with Miles and tossed them onto the table as if laying down a winning hand. "Proof," he declared triumphantly, "of my wife's infidelity." The room fell into a hushed silence. All eyes were on me. But I didn't flinch. Calm and collected, I stood to face him. "Yes," I responded, my voice steady and resolute. "I know this man, but he's not my lover. He's an actor, hired by you, Asher, to frame me." I pulled out my phone and hit play. Miles's voice filled the room, confessing to the entire scheme. Asher's smile faltered, his eyes widened in shock. But I wasn't finished. I produced my own set of photos and videos evidence of Asher's actual infidelities and scattered them across the table. "What about these, Asher?" I challenged, my tone icy. "Can you explain them?" Stammering, Asher tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. His parents' expressions turned to stone. My parents, who had been silent up to now, erupted. "You ungrateful brat!" My father roared at Asher. "We trusted you with our daughter, and this is how you repay us?" Asher's mother burst into tears. "How could you, Asher?" she sobbed. "How could you do this to us, to her?" The aftermath was swift and decisive. We divorced, and Asher's parents, incensed by their son's deceit, dismissed him from their company. His reputation was ruined. Meanwhile, I walked away with $5 million in compensation, as stipulated by our prenuptial agreement. Now, Asher is jobless, desperately trying to rebuild his shattered life, while I am relishing my newfound freedom and peace. I enjoy the quiet, the tranquility of a life without Asher. I emerged victorious, not just surviving but thriving. I outmaneuvered him, outplayed him at his own game, and it feels not only good, it feels just right.